A top executive of Ford has warned that they could be forced to cut back on the sale of petrol cars in the UK in order to meet net zero targets. They have to sell a certain percentage of electric vehicles out of their total sales. How does this push up prices for drivers?
So the deal of the so-called zero emissions mandate is that, as you say, they have to sell a certain number of electric cars, and if they don't, then they are fined essentially, and those fines are passed on to people who have to manufacturers who have sold the correct number of vehicles. So essentially, it ends up as a subsidy from petrol and diesel car owners to EV owners, i.e. from the relatively poor to the relatively wealthy.
And there are concerns that the Chinese electric vehicles will flood the European market and underprice us. All of this while we race to meet the net zero targets. Where could this leave our industry?
Yeah, so these problems are seen across Europe. Essentially, Europe had a major technological advantage in internal combustion engines. Companies like Volkswagen and Mercedes were way ahead of everybody else. But the government has mandated electrical vehicles now, which is an area in which we have no competitive advantage. And the Chinese, who are starting from the same position as us, but with much lower cost base, therefore have a competitive advantage. So what we're seeing is a tidal wave of electric vehicles coming in from China. And essentially, the European manufacturers can't compete. So I don't think the public are really aware of just how bad things are at the moment.
And this is as a result of the net zero targets.
Absolutely, yeah. Everything is being driven by net zero. I mean, all government policy is being driven by net zero. And, I've said it before and I'll say it again, it's completely irrational. There is no assessment of the costs and benefits. It's just virtue signaling. They're going to carry on doing this until the pain gets so bad that they're forced to change direction.
And one thing as well is that the demand for electric vehicles is in part drying up due to driving range anxiety, as well as worries about the safeties of the batteries. So how should this falling demand be handled?
We need to move away from EV mandates and allow people to drive the cars they want. There are obviously serious issues with EVs that you've alluded to. It's already clear that range anxiety isn't going to go away. And what we see is that most of the sales of EVs are actually to fleet buyers. So this is people buying company cars. There are great tax advantages for companies to buy electric vehicles, but the man in the street who actually is buying a car with his own money is much less keen. And those even the limited sales that there are to private buyers are drying up because people just don't want them. They don't want to be stuck with this issue of worrying whether they're going to run out of juice, as it were, miles from home. And yeah, there is this risk, as you say, of there is a fear of that the batteries will burst into flames and take the car with it. And if it's parked in a garage, it may take houses with it as well. I mean, that's the fear. I think there are questions over how real that is, but it is a genuine concern.